My name is Eylul, and today I'm going to be talking about the elephant in the room, otherwise known as the AI. Before I start, I just want to give a warning. Well, two warnings. One, when I'm talking about AI, I'm going to be talking about neural networks that are used specifically to generate images from keywords. And the second thing is that I'm going to be mentioning copyright-related things. This is not a legal talk. I'm not a lawmaker. I'm going to be talking about some economic terms. Again, I am not an economist. I'm an artist. And this is not economic talk. So if anyone is actually an economics academic, I do apologize for overly simplifying some stuff. So the burning question that has been going on for the past year or so has been, who owns the AI generated image? Is it the owner of the algorithm that has generated this content? Is it public domain because the AI algorithm itself is not a legal entity? Is it the person who supplied the keywords? Except, I mean, people commission art, but that doesn't mean that they're the sole owner of it. What about the copyright of the data that is used in the training? What are the rights of those artists? Is it infringing on the rights of the artist whose work that is being trained? What if those artists are being paid? So this is a giant question. Who owns the AI generated image? Let's look at another problem that looks oddly similar that has happened from 2011 to 2018. Who owns the monkey generated photo? So this was a photograph that was taken during in 2011. British wildlife photographer David Slater is working with macaque monkeys in Indonesia, and what happens is that he's working with these animals. He interacts with these animals. He has brought the equipment in, and one of the monkeys. And the story changes over time as he tries to defend himself. But essentially what happens is that one of the monkeys grabs the camera, press the click, and takes these selfies with themselves as they're playing with the camera. So this makes the news. He gets some license money from it. And then what happens is that in 2014, around that time, Wikipedia and TechDirt used this image as public domain because it's taken by an entity who's not technically a legal person. And they argue that this is public domain. The photographer refuses. It goes into a giant argument. At some point, animal rights activists get involved and says that monkey owns the rights of it and that it should be used for the for the conservation of animals. Well intended. Off topic for us. Anyway, that one goes to settlement, but the main issue remains, who owns this photograph? So the arguments, the reason that happens is it public domain? Legally, that makes sense. It's a creature that is taking the picture, and it doesn't matter who owns the equipment. Whoever owns the picture is the one who's taking a photograph. So if you borrow your camera to to a friend, if that friend, even if you are guiding them, takes a photograph, they own it, you do not. As I remind my students many, many times as they do their assignments. On the other hand, a photographer has facilitated this whole interaction with the macaque monkeys. So if it wasn't for the photographer taking the initiative to be there with these animals, this photograph would have never happened. And there are also equivalents of this in contemporary art where the artist is almost facilitator, where an interactive art, for example, would have participants who are the audience, but the art still belongs to the artist. And this copyright problem shows up again and again and again. So one example of this is performance art, where Performance art, for those who doesn't know, it is a type of art where the artist enacts a series of instructions, or a model or somebody else enacts a series of instructions on behalf of the artist to have an interaction that can be then observed by the audience, or in some case participated by the audience. And as the work itself is ephemeral, and the work itself, its original work, is just a series of instructions, it's a very confusing situation if it is copyrightable or not, although some cases fall under performance art, like theater and such. And there is a cases of museums who are literally buying this type of art. Derivative works, these days we assume that fan fiction is perfectly legal to have, or even fan art can be sold in small quantities. This wasn't always the case. Even a decade and a half ago, derivative works, art fanfic has been seen as theft by some artists and some writers, and it was a very gray area. It still technically is, but the activism and awareness on this, and the fact that a generation of fanfic writers grew up, and some of them became writers, professional writers themselves, who defended this, our general acceptance is that this is fair use. Music sharing was a thing that started the whole copyright is theft dialogue. But is it really theft if you are just not taking a copy of it and it is completely non-commercial copy of it? Is this really different than the mixtapes? The end result was we ended up with platforms that are sharing the music for cheap, streaming services, and that's how this whole argument ended. Has it been good for anybody? That's debatable, but that's how we ended up. The copyrighted things, ownership of art, can go as far as color. This is one of my own work, and it was a, let's say, criticism or awareness of the number 63,471 is Yves Klein's documentation of proof that he has invented international Klein blue, the exact tone of blue that is the pigment that is made out of ultramarine and a solid binding, a special binder to make it extremely vibrant. That might be okay, pigment okay, but then this color turned into basically his signature in his performance arts and his paintings. What does it mean that a color is owned by a single artist? And we have seen similar dialogues and conversations happen when, for example, Anish Kapoor was given the exclusive right to use Vanta Black, and then another art, then there were blacks and pinks that nobody was allowed to use, and you might have heard that on the media. But what does it mean for a person to own a color? Something as basic as that. Why is this keeps happening? The problem is that copyright is an error that we are rooting around. Ideas in their default nature, they live and evolve in dialogue that we call culture. Yet we treat them as immutable goods. And we run into a problem because of that. Ideas are not immutable goods. They are created in dialogue, and they are shared in dialogue. And that's kind of where the problem is starting. But then, why does copyright exist? It's evil, right? We shouldn't need it. Not exactly. And to understand why this exists, we need to understand the concept of positive externality. Now, what is externality? And apologies for anyone who does economics. An externality is an additional benefit or cost that is not visible to the entity that is generating it. So, for example, a very classic example of a negative externality, the opposite of positive externality, is environmental damage. A company can use cheaper products or cheaper pipeline that actually pollutes the world. So it has a cost that is affecting everyone, including themselves, but that cost is not visible to them. So they perceive it as cheaper. We see things like government incentives or additional taxes used to internalize this negative externality. Same with the positive externality. An idea idea or innovation takes time and resources to create, to generate. Whether this is an art piece, whether that is a new film, it is a new innovation, whether that's just a new idea, a math problem solved. It takes resources to fix. But then everyone else benefits from the existence of the same idea without having to recreate the whole effort. And this is an example of what we call a positive externality. So without anything to fix this, it is technically more, just looking at it from economic perspective, it is more advantageous to let somebody else do it rather than spend resources on research or on art or anything that requires idea generation. To solve this problem, copyright and patents were created. The idea is that the patents create a patents or copyright gives a temporary monopoly. Monopoly is something we don't like, but it gives a temporary monopoly to help the person or the company that has generated this idea to recoup the costs. So internalize that externality that it has, that benefits the society. So this way we are incentivizing individuals or companies or anyone to generate ideas. The problem is the temporary issue ends up being not so temporary. One of the biggest issues is that we have extensions of durations. This thing started at 20 years, the copyrights, and then it became at some point 70. And I think the last one is like, it is indefinite as long as there is an entity to maintain it. So yeah, we went from this idea that copyright being something that is a temporary offering to fix a problem to it is a right to own. An idea is something that we can own. The other issue that happened concurrently is that innovation and culture is moving way and more faster as communication becomes faster. We have internet. Well, we started with Telegram. Then we have internet. We have big databases. We can look information. Huge groups of people from across the world can collaborate together on the same project, which makes idea generation much faster. And by the way, just to clarify, this is just not research. This is not just science. This is going everywhere from fashion to, artistic movements to all of those things are getting in. We are seeing things so fast that as a result, we are improving, we can add on to it and change it. Yet, even without changing it, this copyright and patent durations becomes very slow compared to what is possible and how fast information can move. There are other issues that is even adding to this. I'm not going to get into that. So one thing that we need to understand so far, and that is the crux of the whole thing, is that artificial copyright and patents, they are not a right. They are just an artificial construct to internalize positive externality, to incentivize generation of ideas. They are artificial constructs. So let's look at our question again. And maybe let's start rephrasing it. So maybe the question needs to be, does AI products benefit and use a positive externality that is generated by human artists? And suddenly when we ask this question, the whole problem becomes a lot easier to understand and hopefully to start to solve. So what is happening currently is that we have, neural networks that generate from keywords finished images, or at least that's the goal. Whether they can do it to a certain success is debatable, but that's where we are trying to go. And the idea is that this is trying to offer a cheaper alternative, something that is competing with the artists. So it takes a positive externality from the artist and is trying to create a competition to the artist that will eventually eliminate them. Or that's the concern. And then, of course, there are some questions like, what if we are paying the artist? But isn't AI also creating the art? Why this is important? an algorithm that is essentially doing a very complicated form of random generation cannot have artistic intent. That is the main difference between AI and a human artist. So whenever we see something that is actually creative from the AI, it is just a lack of bias or difference of bias. And it is the randomness that we are in turn giving meaning to it. In the end, we are the ones who see that as an art or not. And also, I want to put a sidetrack here. Like, can an innovation really be groundbreaking without the context? So can something be groundbreaking without being needed or being understood, finding a common ground within the culture, within our lives, within our experiences? Can an art piece can be truly moving without us kind of getting something out of it? So culture and context within that the art piece lives in is very important. Art gains meaning within the culture and community that it is being interacted with. Again, this idea that idea in its nature is part of a dialogue. It is not an immutable good. So the other problem is the individual voice issue. Basically, what an AI does is it takes all of the data, creates one average voice that can do different things based on what is asked, but so can an artist. You can ask an artist to do, one certain style or the another, but overall, they still bring their own vision. So we are trying to replace many artists with single vision, and that turns out to be a problem. And part of the reason is that art is best when it puts a person into another person's shoes. It's the aspect of that individual experience that we learn from. The third problem, where something that artist creates that is seen as inefficiency in the why AI looks cheaper because it just can do it faster, we lose those intermediate steps. But whether we are doing research or we are doing art or music or whatever, those intermediate steps is where those happy accidents happen, where we learn something unexpected, then becomes a solution of its own. We lose that idea generation byproduct that is so valuable to the overall improvement of our culture. So what can we do to make AI work with the artist rather than competing against it? Because I think there are keys of it there, and there are artists who are trying to use it this way. Less happy accidents and more assisting with the artist's vision. What do I mean with this? Allow modifications and collaboration between traditional methods and AI. So you make an image and then you do a local edit to it by AI or by yourself. Something that is not just keywords, but maybe allows you to drop down, choose different styles rather than you having to know it. Right now you can kind of do it, but it's kind of backward doing it because we just have to choose keywords and then try to guess what keywords is going to change the result and give us something better. We are not really in control of the AI. AI is just spitting something random and we are trying to adjust the parameters. And that's what we want to avoid. Beyond that, this can go only so far. So what we want to do is that, we want to narrow down to specific tools for specific purposes. But beyond that, we also want to have easy ways for individuals to train AIs. Yes, modification can be a solution. Having a way to partially trained data, combine the information in a more efficient way can be a solution. There might be a way for people to learn to generate maybe, I don't know, there might be easier ways to train AI more efficiently. This is where innovation can truly happen. But we need non-technical tools that doesn't require coding, that is available to end users to manage their AI products so that they are doing the exploration. They are not just being handed the result. And obviously, to be able to do that, open source, open data, not just nominally, but actually designed from ground up to be individualized. Thank you. Any questions?
So from my understanding is like I've played a little bit with AI tools, but my understanding is like there's no way like from an image, AI generated image, it's not really a way for tracing back the origin of the what have been used to compose like the final image. That's like there's a whole data sets that's kind of combined, and then the result is like not there's no way of going back to the source, right?
Oh no, that's not what I meant at all.
But yeah, but is that like the case? Is like what's
as far as I know, it is pretty black box at this point.
yeah, it's like
yeah.
black box, yes.
Yeah, it is pretty black box. I don't think that we can generate back. I don't know if there might be a step, for example, to go back and check if something is too similar, if that's what you're concerned about, for example.
Well, no, it would be like more attribution, like, okay, this is a AI generated image, but this was generated based on all those artworks. Like,
yeah.
This is a composition of all those works, and there's like currently like no way of knowing what has been done, because like those, they're pulled like from a huge database of images, huge data sets, and the final image could be like anything in the data set, and we can't know like really what's like, yeah.
I think it's probably important to realize that if you look at an image generation model, you're generally going to see in the full model, there's about enough information to contain 1/3 of the color value of 1 pixel of each of the works that it trained on. An AI model doesn't contain chunks of its data set. It contains inferences that it's drawn from patterns that it observed in the data set. And it can create works that end up being similar to some works that it has seen, but that doesn't mean that it's just like barfing it out of memory. It doesn't know all those things.
It doesn't know that it is taking it out. There are cases that has been seen recently that researchers were able to show that it was able to bring out almost the exact image of one of their training sets. It was a portion of the original images of the training set, but it was done. I was just not like reading some of the articles right before preparing this talk, but there has been some research to prove that that can happen accidentally. It is not doing it by design, but it can do it. That's part of the problem.
Technically, it's recreating the image based on the understanding of patterns that were created in that image when you ask for a similar prompt.
Yeah.
It's like asking another person.
Use the microphone.
It's like asking another person to paint, Le Grand Joff, and they've seen that painting and they remember it. They don't actually have the painting in their memory, but they remember the concepts of like, what does the composition look like? Which side was the river on? Did the people have parasols?
Also, there's a question at the back. So let's pass on. What I'm going to say about that is that is a valid thing you're saying, but at the same time, that is enough for it to be infringement because you are still generating the idea, even if you are not copying the image pixel by pixel parameter.
Wag its tail and recreated it with paint on it on the canvas. If you created a work that's visually too similar, there are points of similarity that you go through your work. You say, this is a copyright violation.
Yeah.
Does not matter how it's generated. Yeah. It doesn't even matter if you never saw that image before. If that image was already copyrighted, you create something yourself that is exactly like it. It's still a copyright violation.
Sorry, I'm trying to get one more question in. Yes?
The underlying question is obviously how you actually can own something that is a digital copy. It's a very tricky thing. But I know that the artist community, at least some of the digital artist community, are using now non-fungible tokens to kind of attribute or attach, let's say, a human identity to a digital copy. And for many of these artists, this has been really groundbreaking for them. Do you know anything about this in your context?
The non-fungible tokens, the problem with that is that small differences can give completely different fingerprints. So you can have a slightly different copy of the image being projected, like or owned by a different person. That, like the idea behind it, there was good that was trying to solve another goal. It was trying to solve that, again, positive externality problem of digital art being accessible to the masses, being part of the culture and not taking it away from the culture, but at the same time still being incentivized to be generated further. So, and like the non-fungible tokens was trying to solve a complete opposite problem, like decouple the ownership from the work itself, so that the work itself could continue being around as part of the dialogue, but still could be owned. Unfortunately, it did end up being used like that, and it turned into an speculation method, and yeah, we all know how that ended. So it doesn't solve this problem. It doesn't solve the fingerprint problem, as far as I know. Yeah. Any other question? Good question, sir. Okay.
Thank you.